My name is Sylvia Harper, 62 years old, and I never imagined my own son would humiliate me in front of our entire family. After serving the final dish at our Thanksgiving dinner, Alex stood up and announced, "If you don't pay rent, don't live here." The silence was deafening as everyone stared at me. Instead of arguing, I simply left that night. The next morning, I made one phone call that changed everything. If you're watching this right now, let me know where you're viewing from. Hit that like and subscribe button and stick around to see the surprise I had waiting for my ungrateful son. For most of my adult life, I was the backbone of our family. My late husband, Richard, and I worked incredibly hard to provide a stable life for our son. Richard was a dedicated civil engineer, and I built a modest but successful interior design business while raising Alex. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we managed our finances carefully, saving diligently for both Alex's education and our retirement. Richard passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack when Alex was just 16. The loss devastated us both, but somehow we pulled through together. I put aside my grief to be strong for our son, making sure he had everything he needed to succeed. When Alex graduated high school 2 years later, I used a portion of Richard's life insurance to help him attend college. After completing his business degree, Alex secured a good job at a marketing firm. By his late 20s, he'd met and married Jessica, a pharmaceutical sales representative with an assertive personality and expensive tastes. They seemed happy, and I was thrilled when they announced Jessica was pregnant with my first grandchild. Around that time, I started experiencing health issues. After decades of standing for hours while working on design projects, my knees were giving out. The doctor recommended surgery followed by extensive physical therapy. The medical bills quickly depleted a significant portion of my savings, even with insurance. Then came the housing crisis. The small rental property Richard and I had purchased as an investment years ago, the property that supplemented my retirement income, plummeted in value. The tenants moved out, and I couldn't find new ones willing to pay enough to cover the mortgage. After months of struggling to make payments, I was forced to sell at a substantial loss. With my retirement fund significantly diminished and my design work slowing due to both the economy and my health issues, I faced a difficult decision. I owned my home outright. The 3-bedroom craftsman-style house Richard and I had lovingly renovated over the decades, but the maintenance costs and property taxes were becoming too much for my limited income. "Mom, I've been thinking," Alex said during one of our Sunday dinners. "Jessica and I want to upgrade to a larger home now that Ellie is getting bigger and we're thinking about having another child, but the housing market is crazy expensive right now." "Yes, it certainly is," I agreed, not yet seeing where this conversation was headed. "What if we bought your house from you? You could live with us, save on expenses, and help with Ellie. It would be perfect for everyone." The proposal seemed reasonable on the surface. Alex offered what he called a fair market value for my home, though it was considerably below what similar houses in the neighborhood had sold for recently. Still, I trusted my son and believed he had my best interests at heart. The money from the sale would replenish my retirement fund, and living with them would indeed reduce my expenses. "We can convert the guest room downstairs into a nice space for you," Jessica added. "You'll have your privacy, but still be close to Ellie." And so, 6 months ago, I agreed to sell them my house. The guest room turned out to be the small office off the kitchen, barely big enough for a twin bed and small dresser. Most of my furniture and personal belongings had to be sold or stored in the garage, as Jessica preferred her modern decorating style throughout the house. At first, things seemed to work. I helped care for my now 4-year-old granddaughter Ellie while Alex and Jessica worked. I cooked meals, kept the house tidy, and even handled the laundry. It was a lot of work for a woman with bad knees, but I loved being with my granddaughter and felt I was contributing to the household. The dynamic began to shift about 3 months after I moved in. Jessica started complaining about small things: how I folded the towels, what recipes I chose for dinner, how I disciplined Ellie. Alex rarely intervened, usually siding with his wife when disagreements arose. "Mom Jessica thinks it would be better if you didn't contradict her parenting decisions in front of Ellie," he told me one evening. "I only suggested that perhaps 4 hours of iPad time was a bit much for a 4-year-old, I replied carefully. Alex sighed. "Just try to follow their rules, okay? It's their house." That phrase, "their house," stung deeply. This was the home where Alex had grown up, where Richard and I had created countless memories. Though they had purchased it, I couldn't help feeling it was still partly mine too. Things deteriorated further when Jessica's parents came to visit for 2 weeks. They took over the living room, constantly criticized my cooking, and made comments about how I was living off their daughter and son-in-law. "It must be nice not having to worry about bills or rent at your age," Jessica's mother, Patricia, remarked one afternoon within my earshot. I bit my tongue, remembering that I had sold my house to Alex at below market value and was providing free childcare that would cost them thousands each month otherwise. But I said nothing, not wanting to create tension. When Jessica's parents left, she seemed to adopt their perspective. References to my free ride became more common. Alex and Jessica began having whispered conversations that abruptly ended when I entered the room. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom. "Your mother needs to contribute financially," Jessica insisted. "We're not running a charity here." "She sold us the house at a discount," Alex countered, though his defense sounded half-hearted. "And she's living here rent-free, eating our food, using our utilities. My parents think she's taking advantage of us." "What do you want me to do?" "She's my mother. Tell her she needs to pay rent like any other tenant would. $500 a month seems fair." I quietly retreated to my tiny room, heart pounding. $500 a month would consume nearly half of my current Social Security income, leaving me little for my medical expenses, car insurance, and personal needs. The next morning, Jessica was unusually pleasant, asking me to prepare a traditional Thanksgiving dinner for 12 people. Her parents, her brother's family, and her best friend's family would all be joining us. I agreed, though cooking such a large meal would be physically challenging with my knee problems. For the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into preparations, planning the menu, shopping carefully to find sales, and pre-preparing whatever dishes I could. Alex and Jessica never mentioned the rent conversation, and I hoped perhaps they'd decided against it. Thanksgiving Day arrived. I rose at 5 in the morning to start cooking, working continuously until the guests arrived at 3 in the afternoon. Despite the pain in my knees from standing all day, I managed to prepare a beautiful spread: turkey with all the trimmings, 3 different sides, homemade rolls, and 2 pies for dessert. As everyone seated themselves around the table in what used to be my dining room, I brought out the final dish, my special cranberry sauce made from Richard's mother's recipe. It was just as I set it down that Alex cleared his throat and changed my life forever. "Before we start, I have something to say," Alex announced, standing at the head of the table. The conversation died immediately as everyone turned to look at him. I settled into my chair, assuming he was about to give the traditional Thanksgiving toast. Instead, he looked directly at me. "Mom, Jessica, and I have been talking. We think it's time you started contributing financially to the household." A heavy silence fell over the table. Jessica's parents nodded approvingly while her brother looked uncomfortable. Ellie, seated beside me, continued coloring, oblivious to the tension. "I don't understand," I said quietly, feeling heat rise to my face as all eyes turned to me. "Rent, Mom," Alex continued, his voice taking on an authoritative tone I'd never heard him use before. "We think $500 a month is fair, considering market rates and what you're getting here." Jessica jumped in her voice, honey sweet but her eyes cold. "We're just trying to teach Ellie about financial responsibility. Everyone needs to pull their weight." I looked around the table at these virtual strangers witnessing my humiliation. Jessica's father, Robert, was smirking slightly. Her mother, Patricia, nodded vigorously. "Actually," Patricia added, "I think that's quite generous. A 1-bedroom apartment in this area would cost much more." My mind raced through calculations. My monthly Social Security check was just over $1,200. After my Medicare, supplemental insurance, prescription costs, and other basic expenses, $500 would leave me with virtually nothing. "Alex," I said carefully, "could we discuss this privately later?" "There's nothing to discuss," Jessica interjected. "This is a business arrangement now. If you don't pay rent, don't live here. Simple as that." The bluntness of her statement, delivered in front of everyone, felt like a physical blow. I looked at my son, waiting for him to soften her words or suggest we talk later. Instead, he repeated her sentence verbatim as if they'd rehearsed it. "That's right, Mom. If you don't pay rent, don't live here." In that moment, Looking at the stranger, my son had become something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, but overshadowed by a sudden clarity. This was no longer my home, and these people were not acting like family. Without a word, I placed my napkin beside my untouched plate, stood up, and walked to my room. Behind me, I could hear Jessica quickly saying, "Well, let's not let the food get cold. Robert, would you carve the turkey?" In my tiny bedroom, I pulled out my suitcase and methodically began packing essentials. There wasn't much I could fit, just clothes, medications, and a few precious photos. I could hear the dinner continuing without me, laughter occasionally floating down the hallway. When I emerged 30 minutes later with my suitcase, the dining room fell silent again. Ellie looked up confused. "Grandma, where are you going?" "Grandma needs to take a little trip, sweetheart," I said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "You're overreacting," Jessica said sharply. "We're just asking you to contribute." I looked at my son, who was studying his plate intently, refusing to meet my eyes. "Alex, could you help me get my other boxes from the garage tomorrow? I'll have found a place to stay by then." He finally looked up, surprise evident in his expression. He clearly hadn't expected me to actually leave. "Mom, come on, you don't have to go." "I think I do," I replied calmly. "Enjoy your dinner." With that, I walked out the front door of what used to be my home, uncertain where I would go, but knowing I couldn't stay another night under that roof. The cool November air hit my face as I slowly made my way down the driveway, my knees protesting as I pulled my suitcase. I had barely reached the sidewalk when I heard rapid footsteps behind me. For a moment, I thought Alex had come to his senses and was following to apologize. Instead, it was Jessica's brother Michael. "Mrs. Harper, wait," he called. "Let me help you with that, and I can give you a ride wherever you need to go." Michael had always been the quieter one in Jessica's family, often seeming uncomfortable with his sister and parents' materialistic values. He took my suitcase and led me to his car. "I'm so sorry about that," he said once we were inside. "That was completely inappropriate." "Thank you, Michael," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Could you take me to the Comfort Inn on Maple Street? I can stay there tonight while I figure things out." As we drove, Michael kept shaking his head. "I don't understand my sister sometimes. Or your son, honestly. That house would have cost them at least $100,000 more if you hadn't sold it to them at that price." $170,000 more, I corrected quietly. "I had it appraised before the sale." Michael whistled low. "And you're providing free childcare. Do you know what full-time nanny service costs these days?" "Around $25 an hour in this area," I replied. "Plus, I've been cooking and cleaning." "So you're effectively paying them about $4,000 a month in services, and they want to charge you $500 rent." He shook his head again. "That's just wrong." When we arrived at the hotel, Michael insisted on carrying my suitcase inside and waited until I had checked in. He handed me his business card. "I work in real estate law. If you need any advice or assistance with anything related to the house sale, please call me." That night, in the impersonal hotel room, I allowed myself to cry for the first time, not just for the humiliation of that evening, but for the son I had apparently lost along the way. When had Alex become this person who would treat his mother with such disrespect? Had Jessica changed him that much, or had these tendencies always been there beneath the surface? In the morning, I awoke with puffy eyes but a surprising sense of resolve. I ordered breakfast from room service, a small luxury I rarely permitted myself, and made a list of people to call. The first was my old friend Barbara, who had been trying to convince me to move into her complex for independent seniors since Richard died. The second was Michael, who had offered his professional help. And the third was someone neither Alex nor Jessica would ever expect Richard's cousin James, a successful real estate developer I'd kept in touch with over the years. James answered on the second ring. "Sylvia, what a lovely Thanksgiving surprise. How are you?" "I've been better, James," I admitted, then explained the entire situation. There was a long silence when I finished. Then, James said something that changed everything. "Sylvia, I was going to call you next week anyway. Remember that property management company I started? We've been buying up residential properties as investments. And as it happens, I've been looking at houses in your son's neighborhood." "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" I asked, a plan already forming in my mind. "If you're thinking I might be interested in making an offer on a house in that area, perhaps even the house next door to your son, then yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. and I might need someone trustworthy to manage the property for me. By that afternoon, James had pulled some strings and arranged for us to tour the house directly next door to my former home. It had been on the market for 2 months, with the owners eager to sell before the end of the year for tax purposes. The house was similar to mine, a well-maintained craftsman with 3 bedrooms, but had been updated more recently with a modern kitchen and bathroom renovations. The current owners had already moved out, leaving it vacant and ready for immediate occupancy. "It's listed at $750,000, James told me as we walked through. But I think we can get it for $700, even given how long it's been sitting. The question is, are you interested in my proposal?" James's offer was straightforward. His company would purchase the house as an investment property. I would live there as the property manager, handling any rental units he might develop in the converted garage. My rent would be covered by the management services I provided, plus I would receive a small monthly stipend. "It's a win-win," he explained. "I get a trustworthy property manager who'll treat the place like her own, and you get a beautiful home next door to your granddaughter." "And my son and daughter-in-law?" I asked, already knowing the answer. James grinned. "They get a daily reminder not to underestimate Sylvia Harper." The next day was a whirlwind of activity. James made an all-cash offer that was immediately accepted. Michael, putting his real estate law expertise to work, arranged for an expedited closing process. Barbara helped me locate an affordable storage unit where I could keep the belongings I'd left in Alex's garage until I was ready to move them into my new home. Meanwhile, Alex had called several times, leaving increasingly concerned voicemails. "Mom, please call me back. I don't know why you're overreacting like this." "Mom, Jessica says she's sorry if her tone came across wrong. We just need to figure out a fair arrangement." "Mom, where are you staying? I'm worried about you." I let each call go to voicemail, not yet ready to speak with him. Instead, I focused on the paperwork. James needed the logistics of retrieving my belongings and setting up utilities at what would soon be my new address. 7 days after Thanksgiving, exactly 1 week after I had walked out of my son's dining room, I received a text from James. "Everything's finalized. Welcome to your new home neighbor." It was time to surprise my son. The moving truck pulled up in front of the house next door to Alex and Jessica's at precisely 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I had hired a crew to retrieve my remaining possessions from Alex's garage and help set up my new residence. From my vantage point in James's car parked across the street, I could see the curtains in Alex's front window twitch. Moments later, he emerged onto the front porch, coffee mug in hand, observing the activity with curiosity. When the movers began unloading boxes clearly labeled Sylvia's books and Sylvia's kitchen items, his posture stiffened visibly. "Ready for your grand entrance?" James asked beside me, barely containing his amusement. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing down the new blouse I'd purchased for the occasion. It was important to me that I look confident and put together for this moment. We crossed the street together, James carrying my small overnight bag as Alex descended his front steps and approached the property line between the two houses. "Mom," he called, confusion evident in his voice. "What's going on here? Whose truck is this?" I walked straight up to him, maintaining a calm I didn't entirely feel. "Good morning, Alex. I'm moving in next door." He stared at me, then at the house, then back at me. "What are you talking about? That house was for sale." "Not anymore," I replied. "It's been purchased." "By who?" he demanded as Jessica appeared on their porch, still in her bathrobe. James stepped forward, extending his hand. "James Harper, Richard's cousin. We met at your wedding, though you probably don't remember. I own a property management company, and this is our newest acquisition." Alex shook his hand automatically, still looking bewildered. "But why is Mom moving in?" "Oh, Sylvia will be managing the property for us," James explained smoothly. "The garage is being converted to a rental unit, and she'll oversee that and handle any maintenance issues that arise. In exchange, she lives in the main house rent-free plus a small stipend." Jessica had joined us by this point, her expression darkening as she processed the information. "You're moving in next door, after walking out on Thanksgiving like that." I believe the exact words were, "If you don't pay rent, don't live here," I reminded her gently. "I'm simply following instructions." The movers called over to ask about furniture placement, giving me a perfect excuse to step away from the increasingly awkward conversation. If you'll excuse me, I need to direct the moving crew. I have a lot to do today. As I turned to leave, Alex reached for my arm. Mom, wait. This is crazy. You can't just move in next door because you're mad about the rent discussion. I removed his hand from my arm. This isn't about being mad, Alex. This is about respecting myself enough not to stay where I'm clearly not valued. You made a business decision, and so have I. But what about Ellie? She's been asking for you, he said, playing what he knew would be his strongest card. I'm right next door, I replied, my voice softening slightly. She can visit any time with your permission, of course. I would never use my relationship with her as leverage, even though others might not have the same scruples. Jessica flinched at the implied criticism. This is ridiculous. You're doing this just to spite us. Actually, James interjected, this is a sound business arrangement benefiting all parties. Sylvia gets housing without financial strain. I get a trustworthy property manager, and you two, he paused meaningfully, get to explain to your daughter why Grandma moved next door instead of living with you. Throughout the day, as I directed the movers and began organizing my new home, I could see Alex and Jessica watching from their windows. Twice, Alex came to the property line as if to speak to me, then seemed to think better of it and retreated. By late afternoon, the moving truck had departed, and I was arranging my familiar furniture in the light-filled living room when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ellie bouncing excitedly on my new front porch. Grandma Daddy says you live here now instead of with us. Can I see your new house? Behind her, Alex stood awkwardly on the sidewalk. She wouldn't stop asking, he explained. I thought maybe a quick tour. Of course, I said, opening the door wider. Ellie is always welcome here. As my granddaughter raced through the house, exclaiming over each room and especially delighted with the window seat in what would be her visiting room, Alex and I stood in uncomfortable silence. Finally, he spoke. Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Jessica and I never meant for you to leave. No misunderstanding, Alex, I replied calmly. You made it very clear that my living arrangement was conditional on financial contribution, despite the fact that I sold you my home well below market value and provided services worth far more than any rent you were asking. It wasn't about the money, he protested weakly. Then, what was it about? Because from where I stand, it certainly seemed financial, and to bring it up for the first time at Thanksgiving dinner in front of guests, that wasn't just about money. That was about humiliation. Alex had the grace to look ashamed. Jessica thought, her parents were saying, it doesn't matter, you're right, it was wrong, and I'm sorry. I appreciate the apology, I said, though I wasn't yet ready to fully accept it. But this arrangement is best for everyone. I have my independence, you have your privacy, and Ellie can still see me regularly. But how did you afford this? He asked, gesturing around. This house must have cost at least $700,000. James purchased it as an investment, I explained again. I'm the property manager, not the owner. James' dad's weird cousin who always talked about real estate at family gatherings. Alex looked skeptical. Why would he do this for you? Because family helps family, Alex, not by demanding rent at Thanksgiving dinner, but by stepping up when someone is in need. The words hung between us heavy with unspoken accusation. Ellie came bounding back into the room before Alex could respond. Grandma, I love your new house. Can I sleep over sometimes? Please. I knelt down to her level. That would be up to your parents, sweetheart, but you're welcome to visit any time they say it's okay. As they left, Ellie skipping happily, Alex subdued, I watched from my new front porch feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction, vindication, and lingering sadness. I had stood up for myself and secured a living situation that preserved both my dignity and financial security, but the relationship with my son had fundamentally changed. That evening, as I sat in my new living room surrounded by familiar possessions in an unfamiliar space, I received a text from Jessica. This is awkward for everyone. We should talk about boundaries with Ellie given the new arrangement. I replied simply, I'm available tomorrow afternoon if you'd like to discuss it. James called to check how the move had gone. So, did they look appropriately shocked? He asked after I'd filled him in. Shocked doesn't begin to describe it. I laughed. But there's something I've been wondering. Why did you really do this, James? We've stayed in touch over the years, but this is an enormous gesture. There was a pause before he answered. Richard was more than a cousin to me. He was my best friend growing up. When he died, I promised him I'd look out for you if you ever needed help. To be honest, I've been waiting for an opportunity to fulfill that promise for years. Tears welled in my eyes at the thought that Richard, even after death, was still looking out for me through the connections he'd maintained in life. Besides, James continued, his voice lighter now, it's actually a solid investment. Property values in that neighborhood have increased 15% in the last 2 years, and I know you'll take excellent care of the place. After we hung up, I wandered through my new home, mentally arranging furniture and planning small touches to make it truly mine. The house had good bones, as we designers say, with character and charm similar to my old home, but updated in ways that would actually make it easier for me to manage with my mobility issues. The bedroom I'd selected overlooked a small backyard garden that, come spring, would become my new project. I'd always loved gardening, finding peace in nurturing growing things. Perhaps Ellie would help me plant flowers when the weather warmed. As I prepared for bed that first night in my new home, I realized something surprising for the first time in months, perhaps even years. I felt truly at peace, no longer walking on eggshells in someone else's home, no longer swallowing hurt feelings to keep the peace, no longer compromising my dignity for the sake of family harmony. Next door, I could see lights still on in what used to be my house. I wondered what Alex and Jessica were discussing, whether they regretted their actions or were simply annoyed by the unexpected consequences. Either way, I had made my point without words. I might be older, I might have financial limitations, but I would not be disrespected or devalued. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, establishing boundaries with Jessica, rebuilding some semblance of relationship with Alex, creating a new normal that allowed me to remain close to Ellie without compromising my self-respect. But tonight, in this quiet moment of triumph, I allowed myself to simply feel proud. Proud of standing up for myself, proud of finding a creative solution, and proud of showing my son that his mother was far more resourceful than he had given her credit for. As I drifted off to sleep, a smile played at my lips. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't confrontation or argument, but simply living well right next door. The next morning, I awoke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't place where I was. Then, the events of the past week came flooding back. This was my new home, my new beginning. After a leisurely breakfast at my own kitchen table, no one rushing me or critiquing my food choices, I began the satisfying task of arranging my belongings. There was something deeply therapeutic about placing each item exactly where I wanted it, without considering anyone else's preferences. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jessica standing on my porch looking uncomfortable but determined. No sign of Alex. "I thought we should talk," she said stiffly, "about the situation." "Please come in," I replied, ushering her into the living room where I'd just finished arranging my favorite reading chair by the window. "Would you like some tea?" Jessica declined, perching on the edge of my sofa as if afraid to get comfortable. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the familiar furniture pieces now arranged in this new space. "This is awkward," she began bluntly. "Having you living next door after everything that's happened." "It doesn't need to be awkward," I countered. "We're adults who can maintain civil relations for Ellie's sake, even if we live separately." Jessica's expression tightened at the mention of her daughter. "That's actually why I'm here. We need to establish some ground rules about your interaction with Ellie. We can't have her running back and forth between houses whenever she wants." "I agree completely," I said, surprising her. "Ellie needs structure and clear boundaries. She should only visit me with your explicit permission, and I'll always respect your parenting decisions while she's under my care." Jessica seemed wrong-footed by my reasonable response, having clearly prepared for resistance. "Well, good. And we need to be clear that you're not to use Ellie to manipulate us or make us feel guilty." "Jessica," I said carefully, "I would never use my granddaughter as a pawn. That kind of behavior damages children. My only interest is maintaining a loving relationship with her while respecting your authority as her parents." She nodded, though her expression remained suspicious. "And what about holidays and family gatherings? This could get complicated." We'll navigate those as they come, I suggested. Perhaps we can alternate hosting duties, or I can join you for certain celebrations if invited. There's no need to decide everything today. Our conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour, Jessica making increasingly unreasonable demands, me responding with calm rationality. By the end, she seemed frustrated by her inability to provoke me into an argument that would justify her narrative of me as difficult and unreasonable. As she prepared to leave, I asked the question that had been bothering me. Jessica, may I ask what Alex thinks about all this? I notice he didn't come with you today. A flicker of something, discomfort, guilt, crossed her face. Alex is still processing everything. He didn't expect you to. Well, he thought you'd come back after a day or two once you'd calmed down. I see, I said simply. He feels bad about what happened, she added, not quite meeting my eyes. But he also feels like you've escalated things unnecessarily by moving in next door. His friends are already joking about it. His mother becoming the neighbor from hell watching his every move. I couldn't help but laugh at this characterization. I have no interest in monitoring Alex's activities. I'm here because it's a good housing solution for me not to spy on you two. Jessica didn't seem convinced, but nodded stiffly before departing with a final reminder that Ellie's bedtime was 7:30, not 8, as I sometimes allowed when babysitting. Over the next several days, I settled into a pleasant routine in my new home. James arranged for contractors to begin converting the detached garage into a studio apartment that could generate rental income. I explored my new neighborhood, discovering a small park within walking distance where I could build up my knee strength with gentle exercise. Alex maintained his distance, though I occasionally saw him watching from their yard when I was gardening or bringing in groceries. Ellie, however, proved harder to keep away. Twice, she appeared at my door unannounced, having slipped out while Jessica was on work calls. Daddy said I should ask permission first. She admitted the second time this happened, but Mommy was busy and I really wanted to show you my new drawing. I gently explained why she needed to follow her parents' rules, then walked her back home using the opportunity to check in with Alex. She's very determined when she wants something, he said, watching Ellie run upstairs with her drawing. It was the first normal conversation we'd had since Thanksgiving. She gets that from your side of the family, I replied with a small smile. Your father was exactly the same way. A flicker of the old Alex, my son before Jessica's influence became so dominant, appeared in his returning smile. I remember. He wouldn't give up on fixing that old motorcycle no matter how many parts he had to fabricate himself. For a brief moment, we connected over shared memories. Then, Jessica called from inside, asking who was at the door, and Alex's expression closed off again. I should go, I said quickly. Please, remind Ellie she needs permission to visit. 2 weeks after moving in, I received unexpected visitors, Jessica's brother Michael and his wife Amelia. They brought a houseplant as a housewarming gift and accepted my offer of coffee. We wanted to see how you're settling in, Amelia explained as I served them in my newly arranged dining room, and to apologize again for that terrible Thanksgiving scene. We've been avoiding my sister, Michael admitted. Her behavior that day was the last straw for us after years of similar incidents. We've decided to create some distance for a while. I was touched by their support, but cautioned them against damaging family relationships on my account. Family disagreements can heal with time, I said. Don't burn bridges you might later wish to rebuild. This isn't just about you, Amelia assured me. Jessica's attitude has been problematic for years. The way she treated you was simply the clearest example of her sense of entitlement. Sometimes creating boundaries is the healthiest approach. Their visit lifted my spirits considerably. It was validating to know others had witnessed the Thanksgiving incident and found it as inappropriate as I had. As Christmas approached, the question of holiday arrangements loomed. Would Alex and Jessica invite me to join their celebration? Should I host my own small gathering? The uncertainty created a lingering anxiety that dimmed my enjoyment of the season. 3 days before Christmas, as I was hanging a small wreath on my front door, Alex approached from next door. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he had done since childhood when he had something difficult to say. Mom, about Christmas, he began awkwardly. It's all right, I interrupted, assuming he was about to explain why I couldn't join them. I've made my own plans. This wasn't entirely true, but it seemed easier than putting him in an uncomfortable position. No, that's not it, he said quickly. I wanted to invite you to join us for Christmas dinner. Jessica's parents are visiting her brother this year, so it would just be us and Ellie. The invitation surprised me. Are you sure I don't want to create tension? I'm sure, he said firmly. Ellie would be heartbroken if her grandmother wasn't there for Christmas, and I miss you, Mom. His admission, tentative as it was, melted some of the ice that had formed around my heart since Thanksgiving. I miss you too, Alex. I would love to come. Christmas dinner was strained but civil. Jessica maintained a polite facade, clearly making an effort for Ellie's sake. Alex seemed caught between his wife and me, trying desperately to keep the peace while ensuring everyone's needs were met. After dinner, while Jessica cleaned up in the kitchen, Alex followed me into the living room where I was admiring the Christmas tree. I handled everything wrong, he said abruptly, at Thanksgiving, and before that too. I turned to face him, giving him my full attention. Jessica was pushing for the rent arrangement, he continued, but I agreed to it, and bringing it up at Thanksgiving in front of everyone, that was cruel and disrespectful. I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong. His apology seemed genuine, but something in his expression told me there was more he wasn't saying. Why did you agree to it, Alex? You must have known $500 would be a significant burden for me. He looked away, shame evident in his posture. Jessica has been saying I don't stand up to you, that I let you take advantage of our generosity. Her parents kept commenting on how you were getting a free ride. I wanted to prove I could be firm. At my expense, I noted quietly. Yes, he admitted. It was selfish and weak. When you left that night, I knew immediately I'd made a terrible mistake. But then you moved in next door, and it felt like you were trying to punish us to embarrass us in front of the neighbors. That wasn't my intention, I explained. James offered a solution to my housing problem that allowed me to maintain my independence while staying close to Ellie. It wasn't about revenge. But you have to admit it's a pretty dramatic statement, Alex said with a hint of his old humor. My mom, the property manager next door. I smiled, despite myself. Perhaps, but it's working out well for everyone. I have appropriate housing, James has his investment property managed, and Ellie can visit easily. And Jessica and I are reminded daily of our mistake, Alex added ruefully. Consider it a learning opportunity, I suggested. Our relationship began a slow healing process after that Christmas conversation. Alex made efforts to visit me regularly, sometimes bringing Ellie for scheduled playdates, occasionally coming alone to help with household tasks I found difficult due to my knees. Jessica remained cool but correct in her interactions with me. I suspected Alex had insisted on repairing our relationship despite her reluctance. For Ellie's sake, I maintained pleasant surface-level conversations whenever we encountered each other, never mentioning the Thanksgiving incident or the circumstances that led to my new living arrangement. By spring, my rental unit in the converted garage was completed and quickly leased to a quiet graduate student who was rarely home. The modest income this generated, combined with my Social Security benefits, gave me financial security I hadn't experienced since before Richard's death. I created a vibrant garden in my backyard with Ellie's enthusiastic, if somewhat chaotic, assistance. Alex built raised beds so I could garden without excessive kneeling, and we spent many pleasant weekend afternoons, working side by side while Ellie supervised. One such afternoon, as Alex helped me plant tomato seedlings, he broached a subject we'd both been avoiding. Mom, I need to ask you something about the house sale. I straightened up slowly, my knees protesting despite the garden kneeling pad. What about it? Michael mentioned something about the price, that you sold it to us well below market value. Is that true? I nodded. The market assessment came in at $870,000. I sold it to you for $700,000. Alex's expression showed genuine shock. I had no idea. The realtor Jessica found said $700,000 was fair market value. Jessica found the realtor, I asked, pieces suddenly falling into place. Did you meet them together? No, he admitted. She handled most of the paperwork, said it would be easier since I was so busy at work. We both understood the implication. Jessica had deliberately sought out a realtor who would undervalue the property, then presented the lowball figure as fair market value. Why didn't you tell me you were selling it at a discount? Alex asked, clearly distressed. Because that's what parents do, I replied simply. They help their children when they can. I didn't need the extra money then. At least, I thought I didn't. And I wanted you and Ellie to have a good home in a safe neighborhood. Alex was quiet for a long moment, digesting this information. All this time, Jessica has been acting like we did you a favor by buying the house, but it was the other way around. It wasn't about favors, Alex. It was about family. At least that's what I thought. Our conversation was interrupted by Ellie calling for help with her own small garden plot, but I could see Alex continuing to process this revelation throughout the afternoon. That evening, I heard raised voices from next door. Though I couldn't make out the words, the tone suggested a significant argument was underway. I felt a twinge of regret for potentially creating more conflict between them, but also knew that relationships built on deception eventually crumble under their own weight. The next day, Alex appeared at my door looking exhausted, but somehow lighter. Jessica and I had a long talk last night. He began without preamble, about a lot of things, but especially about how we've treated you. I hope it was productive, I said cautiously. It was necessary, he replied. The truth is, Mom, our marriage has been struggling for a while. Jessica's spending habits, her parents' influence, her attitude toward you. These are all symptoms of deeper issues we've been avoiding. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. Despite my difficulties with Jessica, I never wanted my son to be unhappy. We're going to try counseling, he continued, and I've made it clear that treating you with respect is non-negotiable moving forward. You're my mother and Ellie's grandmother. You deserve better than what you've received from us. His words touched me deeply. This was the son I'd raised, thoughtful, caring, willing to acknowledge mistakes and work to rectify them. Whatever Jessica's faults, if Alex was rediscovering these qualities within himself, perhaps there was hope for their marriage after all. That means a lot to me, Alex, and I hope the counseling helps you both find a healthier path forward. As spring turned to summer, the changes in my life solidified into a new normal. My little house became truly mine, filled with personal touches and comfortable routines. The garden flourished under my care, providing both beauty and fresh vegetables I often shared with neighbors. My relationship with Alex continued to improve, though slowly, and with occasional setbacks. Jessica made efforts to be more welcoming during my visits, though I sensed it was more for Alex's sake than any genuine change of heart. James visited periodically to check on his investment property, always staying for dinner and regaling me with stories about Richard from their youth. These visits became highlights. I looked forward to a connection to my past that somehow made my present more meaningful. Looking back on the events that began with that humiliating Thanksgiving dinner, I realized they had ultimately led to something positive, a reclamation of my independence and dignity. By standing up for myself, first by walking away, then by creating a new living situation on my own terms, I had modeled for my granddaughter the importance of self-respect and resilience. Yes, the relationship with my son had been damaged, perhaps irrevocably changed, but what emerged from that damage was potentially healthier. A relationship between adult equals rather than the unbalanced dynamic that had developed after I moved into their home. As for Jessica, time would tell whether our relationship could evolve beyond polite tolerance. I remained open to the possibility of genuine connection while protecting myself from further disrespect or manipulation. One warm evening, as I sat on my front porch enjoying the sunset, Alex walked over from next door and joined me in the adjacent rocking chair, a housewarming gift he'd brought shortly after I moved in. You know, he said after we'd sat in comfortable silence for a while, this arrangement actually worked out better for everyone. You have your space, we have ours, but we're still close enough for regular contact. It did, I agreed. Sometimes the most painful moments lead to the best outcomes if we're brave enough to make necessary changes. I learned something important from all this, Alex continued thoughtfully. About respect, about taking people for granted, about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Those are valuable lessons, I observed. I just wish I hadn't hurt you in the process of learning them. I reached over and squeezed his hand. That's how life works, sweetheart. We learn through our mistakes, especially the painful ones. The important thing is that we do learn and try to do better moving forward. As darkness fell and lights began to twinkle in neighboring homes, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this peaceful moment. From homeowner to unwanted house guest to neighbor and property manager, each transition had been challenging in its own way, but each had also strengthened my sense of self-worth and independence. The house next door, my former home, would always hold memories both sweet and painful. But this new house was truly mine, in a way the old one had ceased to be even before I sold it. Here, I answered to no one but myself. Here my boundaries were respected not because I demanded it, but because I had demonstrated I would accept nothing less. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in confrontation or revenge, but in quietly rebuilding your life on your own terms, right where everyone can see it happening. My son had learned this lesson the hard way, watching his mother transform from someone he thought he could dismiss to someone whose strength demanded respect. As we rocked gently in the gathering darkness, I silently thanked him for the painful catalyst that had ultimately led me here. To this porch, this moment, this hard-won peace. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? In the year since I moved next door to my son, our family dynamic has transformed in ways I never could have predicted. Alex and Jessica's marriage counseling revealed deeper issues than either had acknowledged. They separated 6 months ago, with Alex moving into my rental unit while they navigate the complexities of co-parenting Ellie. Watching my son rebuild his life has been both painful and inspiring. At 42, he's confronting mistakes and patterns he'd ignored for years. I let Jessica and her parents dictate too much of our life, he confessed recently. I wanted to please everyone and ended up betraying my own values. And you? Jessica has softened somewhat in the wake of their separation. Without the constant pressure from her parents, who moved across the country last spring, she's developing a more authentic relationship with both Alex and me. We'll never be close, but we maintain respectful communication focused on Ellie's well-being. My relationship with my granddaughter has flourished. Ellie spends alternate weeks with each parent, and when she's with Alex, she practically lives in my house during the day. We garden together, bake cookies, and read stories in the window seat that has become her special place. These precious moments more than compensate for the difficulties that brought us here. James visits regularly, ostensibly to check on his investment property, but increasingly to spend time with me. At 70, he's retired from active management of his business and hints about relocating permanently to be closer. Our friendship has blossomed into something neither of us anticipated, a late-life companionship filled with shared memories, comfortable silences, and occasional adventures. The converted garage apartment will soon need a new tenant. Alex has secured a modest house just 3 blocks away, close enough for convenient co-parenting, but far enough for healthy boundaries. I need to stand on my own, he explained, figure out who I am outside of a relationship. My knees have improved significantly thanks to regular physical therapy and the gentle exercise of gardening. I've even begun teaching a small community class on container gardening for seniors with mobility issues, sharing the techniques that have worked so well for me. Looking back, I realized that moment at the Thanksgiving table, when my son told me, "If you don't pay rent, don't live here," was actually a gift in disguise. It forced me to reclaim my independence, establish clear boundaries, and discover strengths I'd forgotten I possessed. Had I simply paid the rent they demanded, swallowing my hurt and pride, I would have remained trapped in an increasingly toxic situation. My financial resources would have dwindled, my self-esteem eroded further, and the power imbalance grown even more pronounced. Instead, by walking away and then creating an unexpected solution, I changed not only my circumstances but the entire family dynamic. I demonstrated to my son, my daughter-in-law, and most importantly to my granddaughter, that respect is non-negotiable, that creativity can triumph over cruelty, and that sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect is simply building a better life next door. As I sit in my garden on this perfect summer evening, watching Ellie chase butterflies while Alex and James discuss renovation plans for his new house, I feel profound gratitude for the journey that brought us here. The pain was real, the challenges significant, but the outcome has been a family, slowly healing relationships, recalibrating, and new possibilities emerging from what once seemed like irreparable damage. If my story resonates with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family challenges and how you navigated them. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? What unexpected blessings emerged from painful situations in your life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, I'd be grateful if you'd like subscribe and share this video with someone who might need encouragement today. Remember, sometimes the best response to "don't live here" is creating a beautiful life elsewhere, perhaps right next door. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to stand up for your dignity when it matters most.